World News Live updates U.S. designates Baloch Separatist group as a terrorist organization. Stay informed with our World News Live blog, your real-time window into global events. From major geopolitical developments and scientific breakthroughs to royal family updates and cultural milestones, we bring you fast, factual, and curated updates as they happen. Whether it's unfolding conflicts, diplomatic shifts, climate alerts, or key moments in international politics, our live blog keeps you ahead of the news curve. Designed for readers who want both speed and substance, this is your go-to source for staying connected with the world minute by minute. Headline by headline, US chipmakers NVIDIA and AMD have reportedly agreed to a proposal to pay the US government $15 of revenue from high-end AI chip sales to China in exchange for licenses to sell in the country, as per a report in TechCrunch. The information, which originates from official Times article citing anonymous sources, suggests a potential major shift in U.S. export control policy. This move would add an economic tariff-based model to the existing national security rationale for restricting advanced technology trade with China. If implemented, the policy would allow the companies to regain access to the significant Chinese market for their most powerful chips, which have been subject to escalating U.S. export bans. European Union leaders have collectively stated that Ukraine's borders must not be altered by military force and that its people must have the freedom to decide their own future, according to a report in BBC. This unified stance directly addresses Russia's past actions, including the 2014 annexation of Crimea and the 2022 attempted annexation of 4 other Ukrainian regions, which are condemned as illegal under international law. The declaration reinforces the EU's commitment to Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity, further isolating Russia diplomatically and upholding the principle that international borders cannot be changed through aggression. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese stated that his Israeli counterpart, Benjamin Netanyahu, is in denial over the scale of suffering in Gaza. The comment came after Albanese revealed details of a recent phone conversation between the two leaders. This public criticism from a traditionally allied nation comes amid growing international concern over the humanitarian crisis and Israel's conduct of the war. A United Nations-backed investigative team has found significant evidence of systemic torture in Myanmar's detention centers, including electric shocks, strangulation, and gang rape, according to a report in AP. The findings were presented by Nicholas Kumjian, head of the Independent Investigative Mechanism for Myanmar IIMM, in the team's latest annual report covering the one-year period ending June 30th. The report details widespread abuses that have occurred since the military seized power from the elected government in a February 2021 coup, with alleged crimes including the burning of sexual body parts and other severe forms of torture. Employees at Al Jazeera observed a moment of silence to mourn 5 staff members the network said were assassinated in an Israeli strike in Gaza, Al Jazeera said in a report. The event highlights the significant risks and unprecedented number of fatalities for media professionals covering the conflict. The deaths have amplified calls from international press freedom and human rights organizations for independent investigations and accountability for the killing of journalists in war zones under international law. A man in the U.S. is facing potential jail time for smuggling 850 turtles to Hong Kong, according to a report in BBC. The U.S. Department of Justice stated the turtles were inhumanely packed inside socks and placed in boxes deceptively labeled as plastic toys to evade detection. This case highlights the persistent challenge of the global illegal wildlife trade, a multi-billion-dollar black market where reptiles are heavily trafficked, particularly to Asian markets. The incident underscores the role of the U.S. and Hong Kong as key points in international smuggling routes and the sophisticated methods used by traffickers, posing significant challenges to law enforcement and international supply chain security. Footage has emerged showing the execution of a medical volunteer in southern Syria, highlighting a recent wave of sectarian violence that has reportedly killed over 1,000 people, according to a report in the New York Times. The incident underscores the persistent instability in southern provinces like Dara and Suwaida, which have been plagued by assassinations and clashes despite the Syrian government regaining nominal control in 2018. The targeting of medical personnel is a recurring pattern in the Syrian conflict, constituting a war crime under international humanitarian law and severely hampering aid operations. This violence reflects the deep sectarian divisions that continue to fuel the conflict, undermine stability, and pose security challenges for the wider region. Paris has opened 3 public bathing areas in the Seine River for the first time in over a century, drawing thousands of residents and tourists as a heat wave brings temperatures up to 38°C-100°F, AP says in a report. The opening follows a decades-long cleanup initiative to reverse pollution that led to a swimming ban in 1923. The project's success is also a test ahead of the Paris 2024 Olympic Games, which are set to host open water events in the river. The new swimming areas have become a popular attraction, though continuous water quality monitoring remains necessary. Chinese President Xi Jinping and his Brazilian counterpart, Lula da Silva, have held discussions on enhancing cooperation to promote a model of self-reliance for developing nations in the Global South, as per a report in Al Jazeera. The conversation took place against the backdrop of ongoing economic competition with the U.S. and the continued fallout from the U.S.-China trade war. The initiative aims to provide alternative development frameworks and reduce dependency on Western-dominated fiscal and political systems, reinforcing a push towards a more multipolar world order. Iran has described upcoming talks with the International Atomic Energy Agency (IAEA) as complicated, as per a report in Al Jazeera. The statement comes ahead of a planned visit by the agency, which Tehran has clarified will not include visits to its nuclear facilities, focusing instead on high-level political and technical dialogue. The discussions are expected to address long-standing issues, including Iran's escalated uranium enrichment beyond the limits of the 2015 nuclear deal, restricted IAEA access to monitoring equipment since 2022, and the agency's demand for explanations regarding uranium traces found at undeclared sites. These talks occur against the backdrop of stalled international negotiations to revive the 2015 Nuclear Accord (JCPOA). Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced on Monday an expansion of plans for a temporary military takeover of the Gaza Strip, extending beyond Gaza City to potentially encompass the entire territory, Fox News says in a report. Stating that Israel has no choice but to finish the job, the move signals a significant broadening of direct Israeli control and is linked to the stated war aims of dismantling Hamas military and government capabilities. This plan heightens diplomatic tensions, as it appears to conflict with proposals from international partners, including the U.S., which have advocated for post-conflict Palestinian governance and have voiced opposition to a long-term Israeli reoccupation of the Strip. Public swimming has officially returned to the Seine River in Paris for the first time in 102 years, with thousands of people using 3 newly opened, designated bathing sites, according to a report in AP. This development follows a massive, long-term cleanup project driven by the city's preparations for the 2024 Olympic Games. The swimming areas are expected to see increased use as France's National Weather Service, Météo France, has placed Paris under high vigilance for an impending heat wave with temperatures forecast to reach 38 degrees Celsius 100 F. A ceasefire brokered by Malaysia with backing from the US and China appears to be holding between Thailand and Cambodia. But hundreds of thousands of Cambodian migrant workers are heading home, according to a report in AP. The exodus follows armed clashes in July that killed at least 43 people and displaced over 260,000, stemming from long-standing disputes over their 800-kilometer border. The mass return of workers poses a significant economic threat to both nations, potentially causing a sharp decline in crucial remittances for Cambodia and creating acute labor shortages in Thailand's agriculture and construction sectors. Hundreds of thousands of Cambodian migrant workers are returning home from Thailand due to an ongoing border conflict, despite a fragile, internationally brokered ceasefire. The tensions stem from disputes over sections of their 800-kilometer border, which led to armed clashes in July that killed at least 43 people and displaced over 260,000. This mass migration poses significant economic challenges, potentially creating labor shortages in Thailand's construction and agriculture sectors while straining Cambodia's economy through a loss of vital remittances. The ceasefire, mediated by Malaysia with support from the US and China, is currently holding, but the underlying territorial disputes remain a threat to regional stability. A French nuclear power plant has temporarily shut down operations after a massive swarm of jellyfish blocked its cooling water intake systems, as per a report in Al Jazeera. This incident highlights the growing vulnerability of critical coastal infrastructure, particularly in the energy sector, to marine biological events exacerbated by climate change. The proliferation of jellyfish, linked to rising ocean temperatures, poses a significant operational risk, potentially leading to reduced power output, increased maintenance costs, and concerns for regional energy security, especially in nations like France that are heavily reliant on nuclear power. The shutdown is a controlled safety measure to clear the blockage and does not indicate a nuclear emergency. The 2025 Rugby Championship is set to begin, serving as a critical strategic platform for Southern Hemisphere rugby's top nations to shape their squads for the 2027 World Cup in Australia, Reuters said in a report. The tournament, which kicks off with South Africa hosting Australia, provides an early look into the long-term planning of all 4 participating nations: South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, and Argentina. For the teams, the competition represents a dual-purpose challenge, competing for the annual title while testing new talent and tactics for the future. For Rugby Australia, the performance of its national team is crucial for building commercial momentum and public engagement ahead of hosting the 2027 event, and a strategic move to manage its tourism sector. Nepal is offering free climbs on 97 peaks by waiving government-mandated permit fees, as per a report in BBC. This policy is a direct response to persistent issues of overcrowding, pollution, and safety concerns on Mount Everest, which attracts the majority of mountaineering tourists. By promoting lesser-known mountains, the government aims to diversify its tourism economy, spreading economic benefits to new regions and alleviating the environmental pressure on the Everest ecosystem. The waiver applies only to the permit fee, with climbers still responsible for the substantial costs associated with guides, logistics, and equipment. Approximately 100 people, including several children, crossed from Morocco into the Spanish North African enclave of Ceuta by swimming early Saturday, prompting local authorities to warn that their reception system is close to collapse, The Guardian says in a report. This event is part of a recent surge in attempts to reach the EU territory, with more than 50 children having made the same risky journey on July 26 alone. The situation places immense strain on Ceuta's social services and infrastructure, which have been described as overwhelmed. The sustained migration pressure also tests the delicate diplomatic relationship between Spain and Morocco, as Spain relies on Moroccan cooperation for border control, highlighting the persistent challenges at the EU's external borders in Africa. The United States has designated the Balochistan Liberation Army (BLA) and its elite Majid Brigade as a specially designated global terrorist entity, a move hailed by Pakistani officials, AP said in a report. This decision coincides with a high-profile visit to the U.S. by Pakistan's Chief of Army Staff, General Asim Munir, and follows a recent U.S.-Pakistan dialogue aimed at strengthening defense-industrial cooperation. The designation is expected to provide a significant boost to Pakistan's counter-terrorism efforts, increase international pressure on the BLA, and signal a strengthening of bilateral security relations. It may also improve security for the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor (CPEC), as the BLA has a history of targeting Chinese interests in the region. Russia plans to import more than 50,000 North Korean workers to fill labor gaps exacerbated by its war in Ukraine, with some North Koreans describing their conditions as being like slaves, according to a report in BBC. This move signifies a deeper economic alignment between Moscow and Pyongyang and constitutes a direct violation of UN Security Council sanctions from 2017, which mandated the repatriation of all North Korean workers by 2019. The arrangement provides North Korea with a crucial source of foreign currency to circumvent international sanctions, while Russia attempts to mitigate critical labor shortages in its wartime economy. The reported conditions have raised significant concerns among human rights organizations regarding forced labor and exploitation. Indian electric motorcycle manufacturer Ultraviolet has secured $21 million in funding from Japanese electronics and battery component supplier TDK to facilitate its global expansion, TechCrunch says in a report. The investment is intended to help the India-based company launch its electric motorcycles in approximately 40 European countries, as well as markets in Latin America and Southeast Asia. This funding will support the scaling of production and the establishment of international distribution networks, building on the company's domestic launch of its F-77 model. For TDK, the investment represents a strategic move to deepen its involvement in the growing electric vehicle ecosystem, where it is already a key supplier. New protocols for the 38th America's Cup, set for Naples, Italy, in July 2027, introduce significant changes to the historic sailing regatta, as per a report in AP. crews on the 76-foot AC-75 boats will now consist of 5 members, with the mandatory inclusion of at least 1 woman. A new nationality rule also requires that at least 2 crew members, including 1 female, must be nationals of the team's country of origin. This shift in crew composition is enabled by another major change: the boat's critical hydraulic systems will now be battery-powered, reducing the need for purely physical human grinders. These changes are expected to impact team recruitment strategies, broaden the event's global appeal to new audiences and sponsors, and drive innovation in marine battery technology. The United Nations has warned that entire families and a generation are being wiped out in the Gaza Strip by the ongoing conflict, as per a report in Al Jazeera. UN agencies have highlighted catastrophic conditions, including widespread malnutrition and deaths from starvation, which they attribute primarily to Israeli restrictions on humanitarian aid. The report also notes that continued Israeli military strikes have resulted in dozens of new Palestinian casualties. Additionally, concerns are mounting over the unprecedented number of journalists killed, with allegations that they have been deliberately targeted, prompting calls for independent investigations into their deaths, and response to the growing coordination of transnational scam networks, particularly those operating from hubs in Southeast Asia. The Global Anti-Scam Alliance GASA will convene the Global Anti-Scam Summit GAS Asia 2025 in Singapore on September 23, as per a report in AP. The event is expected to bring together over 1,200 participants, including industry leaders, policymakers, and law enforcement agencies from more than 60 countries. The summit's primary objective is to devise effective real-world strategies and foster international cooperation to prevent and disrupt sophisticated online scams, which pose significant threats to global official systems and public trust. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky stated that Russian President Vladimir Putin is preparing for a new offensive and is not ready for a ceasefire or an end to the war, Al Jazeera says in a report. This assessment is supported by intelligence indicating a Russian buildup of troops and equipment along the Eastern Front, particularly following recent territorial gains. The warning underscores the unlikelihood of near-term peace negotiations and highlights Ukraine's urgent and sustained need for Western military aid to defend against what is expected to be intensified military pressure. Renewed confidence from technology giants Google and IBM suggests a workable quantum computer could be developed by the end of the decade, Official Times says in a report. This optimism stems from significant recent breakthroughs in quantum error correction and the engineering of more stable quantum bits qubits, which are critical for overcoming the high error rates that have historically plagued quantum systems. While the timeline for a full-scale, fault-tolerant machine is considered ambitious by many experts, the progress signifies a major step forward in the field. The development has major economic and security implications, with the potential to transform drug discovery, facial modeling, and AI, while also posing a significant threat to current cybersecurity encryption standards. A new heat wave is set to sweep across Central and Eastern Europe following a brief period of cooler weather, as per a report in The Guardian. Spain and Portugal are expected to bear the brunt of the extreme temperatures, with forecasts predicting highs of 44 C. This event exacerbates ongoing issues, as the Iberian Peninsula has already endured persistent heat since late July. The heat wave has significant economic implications, including elevated wildfire risks, potential strain on energy grids from increased air conditioning use, and further stress on agriculture already impacted by severe drought conditions. The report also notes that drought is a concurrent issue in North America, highlighting a broader global trend of extreme weather. FIFA is implementing a new human rights protocol for World Cup host cities, but the strategy is facing skepticism from advocates who find it lacks enforceability, according to a report in AP. In response to human rights issues that have impacted past tournaments, FIFA now requires all host committees for the upcoming 2026 World Cup to create specific action plans to protect human rights. However, human rights groups have criticized the new measures, arguing that FIFA weakened a more robust proposal and that the current protocol lacks clear, enforceable standards and sufficient direction for local officials to effectively implement them. The U.S. military's reliance on rare earth elements processed in China poses a significant national security vulnerability, impacting the production of advanced weaponry and defense systems, according to a report in Foreign Policy. China's demise lies not in mining but in its near monopoly on the complex and environmentally intensive processing stages, a chokehold it has previously signaled a willingness to leverage through export controls on other critical minerals. In response, the U.S. Department of Defense is actively implementing strategies, including direct investment in domestic and allied mining and processing facilities, to establish a resilient supply chain independent of China. This move is part of a broader global trend, with allies like the European Union and Australia also taking steps to secure their own critical raw material sources, highlighting a worldwide push to de-risk from geopolitical supply chain disruptions. Israeli human rights organization B'Tselem has released new video footage appearing to show the fatal shooting of a Palestinian activist by an Israeli settler during a confrontation last month in the occupied West Bank, according to a report in AP. The video, obtained from the family of the victim, Ada Hamail, shows a settler firing a gun toward the person filming. The footage then cuts, but the camera continues to record sounds of the person moaning in pain. The incident reportedly occurred during a confrontation between the settler and unarmed Palestinians, amid a documented rise in settler violence in the region since late 2023. Sudan's Rapid Support Forces (RSF) reportedly killed 40 people during an attack on the Abu Shuk displacement camp in North Darfur on Monday, according to a report in AP. The local rights group, Emergency Response Rooms, stated that RSF fighters raided the camp, located outside El Fasher, targeting civilians in their homes. This attack occurs amid an intensified siege by the RSF on El Fasher, the last major city in the region not under its full control and a critical humanitarian hub. The violence further destabilizes a region already facing a severe famine and what the UN has described as the world's largest humanitarian crisis, stemming from the conflict that began in April 2023. American teen influencer Ethan Gua has been stranded in the Chilean Antarctic since June after illegally landing his small plane during a record-setting attempt, AP says in a report. Chilean authorities have opened an investigation into the incident, alleging Gua provided a falsified flight plan and landed without authorization. The unauthorized landing occurred while Gua was attempting to become the youngest person to fly solo to all 7 continents. Iraq was hit by a nationwide blackout on Monday after its power grid failed under the strain of a severe heat wave and surging electricity demand, according to a report in France 24. Temperatures approaching 50 C122F combined with increased power consumption for a major Shiite pilgrimage pushed the fragile infrastructure past its breaking point. The widespread outage exacerbates Iraq's long-standing electricity crisis, which severely impacts daily life and hampers economic activity, forcing businesses and residents to rely on costly private generators. Scientists from Mexico's National Autonomous University are filtering water in the Xochimilco canals to find genetic traces of the critically endangered axolotl salamander, as per a report in AP. The species, once plentiful in its native habitat, is now nearly impossible to find in the wild due to severe water pollution, habitat destruction, and predation by invasive fish. This non-invasive EDNA monitoring provides crucial data to assess any remaining wild populations, guiding conservation and potential reintroduction efforts for the scientifically valuable creature, which is renowned for its unique regenerative abilities. South Korea's military has contracted by 20 in the last 6 years, a direct consequence of the country's severe demographic crisis and the world's lowest birth rate, The Guardian says in a report. A Defense Ministry report highlights a shortfall of 50,000 troops needed to maintain defense readiness and also notes a decline in the number of available officers, which could lead to operational difficulties. This personnel shortage, occurring amid persistent military threats from North Korea, is forcing Seoul to accelerate investment in advanced military technology, including artificial intelligence and robotic systems, to compensate for reduced manpower and address significant national security implications. 2 women, including the infant's mother and the alleged practitioner, have been arrested in the Gambia in connection with the death of a baby. From female genital mutilation FGM, BBC says in a report. The incident has fueled widespread outrage and intensified protests from human rights organizations. The arrests come at a critical time, as the Gambia's National Assembly is debating a controversial bill to repeal the 2015 law that criminalized the practice. Activists and international observers warn that repealing the ban would represent a major setback for human rights and could jeopardize the Gambia's international standing and access to foreign aid. Bipartisan U.S. lawmakers are pressing the Trump administration to maintain the AUKUS security agreement with Australia and the UK, which aims to supply Australia with nuclear-powered submarines, as per a report in AP. The plea coincides with a Pentagon review of the 4-year-old pact, a process that has highlighted concerns about the U.S. defense industrial base's capacity to build submarines for both its own Navy and for Australia. The review raises significant business and economic questions for the American shipbuilding industry, which is central to the pact's success. Canada's 2025 wildfire season has already become the second most destructive in the nation's history, with over 470 fires currently classified as out of control across the country, The Guardian says in a report. Scientists attribute the prolonged and exacerbated burning to the effects of climate change, which is creating what experts are calling a new reality of more frequent and intense fire seasons. The widespread blazes are causing significant destruction, forcing numerous community evacuations, and leading to poor air quality from smoke plumes that also affect the U.S. The situation has significant economic implications, disrupting key industries like forestry and tourism, and has necessitated ongoing international firefighting assistance, a global law enforcement coalition has seized 1 million from the Russian-based ransomware group responsible for the Royal and Black Suit strains, as per a report in TechCrunch. The operation targeted the group's infrastructure, which is allegedly responsible for extorting approximately $370 million from victims since 2022. This seizure is part of a broader international strategy focused on disrupting the official operations of major cybercriminal enterprises, following similar actions against other prominent groups like Lockbit and ALPHV Black Cat. While the seized amount is a fraction of the group's total alleged earnings, the action aims to cripple their operational capabilities and official incentives. Police in Berlin arrested several demonstrators at a protest concerning Al Jazeera journalists killed in Gaza, as per a report in Al Jazeera. The demonstration highlighted accusations from protesters and the media network that the journalists were deliberately targeted by Israeli forces, a claim Israel denies. The arrests occurred within the context of ongoing international concern from press freedom organizations about the high number of media workers killed.